Okay, we are looking at day 6 here. I forgot what day it was. Day 6 here, which is going to be osteoporosis and arthritis. Both of these are degenerative disorders, meaning that like they're almost in a way I guess they're not 100% inevitable, but like this is something that we very, very commonly see just as we get older, right? We're going to see a loss of bone density, right? Because generally, as we get older, we get less active. And so our body's like, well, we're not as active. I guess we don't need as much bone. So we lose bone density. And then arthritis is generally like as we get older, our body starts to get worn down. And so like, cartilage gets a little bit thinner because like you've been using those knees to walk for, 60, 70 years at this point. So things start to get a little bit worn down, and that's arthritis. So we're going to go ahead and talk about like what causes both of these diseases and sort of what they are, and what modifications to make. So if we're looking at osteoporosis, by definition, osteoporosis is going to be a condition in which there is a decrease in bone mass and bone density, as well as an increase in the space between your bones. So we also see more space in your joints, which sounds like it would be a good thing because we do know that increased space between the joints results in increased mobility. But what this actually does is create instability because, yeah, you have more space, but you have the same joint capsule as before, and that's actually not a good thing. We like to have space between our joints if we're born that way. Then you get to be as, kind of by default, plenty flexible. But like if you start to have more space between your joints, but your bones are still kind of shaped the same way they were, and your connective tissues shaped the same way they were, all it does is create instability. So let's look at osteoporosis. Take a look at our bone density here. So you guys know this, we've talked about it before. Your bones are very porous. This is what bone tissue kind of looks like when you zoom in on it, right? It's this like little honeycomb of all these like little individual pieces, right? Well, osteoporosis is going to look something like this, right? Here's healthy bone here on the left, and here's osteoporosis bone here on the right. And so you can actually see there's larger holes throughout the entire bone here. So this bone is much more brittle. It's also much lighter. And this is one of the things they'll actually look for. This is one of the things doctors, you might wonder why like your doctor takes your scale weight when you go in for a checkup, but this is actually one of the reasons why they will always test your weight. If you see a dramatic loss in body weight, but you see maybe an increase or a decrease in things like muscle mass and stuff, like that's a sign that you are losing weight from your bone density. And so we see low body weight actually as one of our warning signs for bone density issues. So again, you can see here, this is very solid bone. There's not a lot of space between the bone there. This is osteoporosis right here. You can see there's a lot of space between those bones. So this bone over here is much more likely to fracture. And that is sort of the biggest thing that we are seeing. So what causes osteoporosis, right? Oh, I forgot. It's an increased porosity or holiness in your bones. Not that your bones are more holy, it's that your bones are more holy. That's my favorite stupid joke. I'm sorry. But there's more holes in your bone. You get the bones of saints. So a precursor to this is a condition referred to as osteopenia. Osteopenia is where we start to see a decrease in the calcification of bone tissue. And so like basically, if we start to notice that your bone mass is going down and we see that like your bones are not calcifying as effectively, that is what leads to this decrease in bone mass. So remember, like the way your bones work, right? You've got osteoblasts, which are laying down this kind of glue-like mixture on your bones. And then that glue-like mixture is attracted to calcium ions. And so calcium ions will passively move towards that glue mixture, and then it'll kind of settle in and it'll harden and calcify. And that's how we make new bone tissue. So when your osteoblasts become less active, which is something that happens naturally as we get older, we're going to call that osteopenia, which is a decrease in the calcifying of your bones. So when you're younger, God dang it. when you're younger, your osteoblasts, which are your bone makers, right? They're much more active, and so that results in greater bone formation. But as we get older, our osteoclasts, which are your bone breaker downers, they become more active. And what that does is that decreases your bone density. But here's what we know, right? Oh, and then actually, I guess here's like another, here's another definition here, just before I get back into the osteoblast, osteoclast thing. I remember the slide now. This seems so out of place. I do this every time. I get ahead. Anyway, all right. The National Institute of Health consensus on the development panel of osteoporosis. There's a fun panel to be on. Defines osteoporosis as a skeletal disorder characterized by compromised bone strength, predisposing to an increased risk of fracture. What they're saying is, you have less dense bones, your bones are more likely to break and fracture. And so bone density is going to reflect your bone quality, right? And now we're back into osteoblasts again. So weird. When you're younger, like I said, your osteoblasts are very active, and your osteoclasts, which are your bone breaker downers, are very inactive. But as we get older, we don't really 100% know why, but we do know that those two things kind of switch. Now, here's the thing. You guys will remember this from when we talked about the kinetic chain and we talked about the skeletal system. How do we make our osteoblasts, our bone makers, how do we make those more active? Well, we create microscopic imperfections in our bones. So we fracture our bones, but on a microscopic level. I'm not talking about like breaking your bones, but I am talking about like creating little tiny itty bitty structural damages, little tiny ones, microscopic ones. That way the bone can still function very well, but your body gets this moment where it goes, oh man, like our bone got broken down. I guess we use this bone all the time. You know what I'm gonna do? Because we use it so often, I'm gonna make it a little bit more resistant to damage than it was before. Now, again, we don't know why the body does this, but we know how to make the body do this, right? We don't 100% understand why we are programmed this way, but the same thing is true about our muscles, right? You know, they say if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Like that's like my favorite moment from the 40-year-old version. I heard if you don't use it, you lose it. Is that a real question? No. But that is true when it comes to muscles and bone density. If you do not use your muscular system, if you do not use your skeletal system, your body goes, I've got all this extra tissue laying around that I'm not using. And so it actually reduces it. It gets rid of it. Whereas like when you are continually breaking down your muscle, you know, your body goes, what did you do to my quads? You tore them up. All right. If you're going to keep ruining these things, I'm just going to make them more resistant to damage. And so it makes larger muscles, right? It makes them more larger, stronger, more resistant to damage. And that way you are adapting to the stress that you are placing upon your body. When we get older, we need to make sure that we stay active, because by staying active, you are creating microscopic imperfections in your bones, imperfections in your muscles, and your body's going to go, crap, I got to keep this stuff alive. If this, you know, we need to meet the demands of an active lifestyle. So I'm going to make a body that can be strong enough to overcome that active lifestyle. That's, again, function following form, right? So as we get older, we got to make sure that we continue exercising, and particularly doing the types of exercise that result in increasing bone density, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, are typically weight-bearing types of exercise. So there are going to be two types of osteoporosis. Type 1 is the most common, and this is the type that is prevalent in post-menopausal women. So, you know, as women get older, they're going to go through menopause, right? And that's going to be a big hormonal change. And with that hormonal change, we're going to see a massive decrease in estrogen levels. And as those estrogen levels decrease, there is a connection between how estrogen increases bone density in women. And so when there's a deficiency in estrogen, we see a deficiency in calcium absorption on the part of those osteoblasts, right? So that's the most common. This is why osteoporosis is typically, when you think of osteoporosis, typically you think a lot of times like of like senior women. But make no mistake, it can happen literally to anybody who is just very, very, very inactive. So, you know, in the same way that testosterone is an anabolic hormone, estrogen is also an anabolic hormone. I know that like a lot of times because of like the way estrogen and testosterone are kind of portrayed in things like the media and stuff, a lot of times we think of like, you know, testosterone is like the manly build stuff up hormone, and we think of estrogen as the opposite of that. You know, which is why like when men take too much testosterone, their body will produce estrogen, which is kind of the opposite to balance it out. And so then people are like, oh, well, estrogen must be a catabolic hormone. It's not. It's totally an anabolic hormone. Our bodies, the differences between the two sexes is like we use these sex hormones in different ways. So guys, we don't want to have massive levels of estrogen. We want to have high levels of testosterone. Women
What
don't.
about cortisol? Cortisol.
So cortisol is a catabolic hormone. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and that's actually a catabolic hormone that does have negative effects on the body physiologically because
we get that every day though.
Stress. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, here I can make you make cortisol right now. Noel, I'm going to give you an extra 20 questions on the final. Right? Boom, cortisol. You know, or like, you know, hey, I'm going to start holding class at 6 a.m. and if you can't make it, too bad, you're going to fail. Cortisol. Yeah, no, we make cortisol all the time whenever you get stressed out. But cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It is actually designed to decrease, you know, muscle mass and increase fat stores. And remember, like that is like in
do it decrease testosterone too?
Yeah, absolutely. It can over like the long term. So here's the thing, like testosterone is anabolic. It amps the body up. Catabolic hormones calm the body down, right? So that's sort of what we see there, right? So for instance, like one of the weird things they're looking into right now, and I don't know how far this research is, and I am no endocrinologist, so I'm not an expert on hormones. But there is some really interesting research being done right now into melatonin and ghrelin. So ghrelin's another, you guys know what melatonin is. It's a hormone that our body produces when we sleep. It helps us process sleep more effectively. For the record, it does not make you sleepy though. So when people take it and they're like, oh, now I can go to sleep. Oh, that's not how that works. But it's a hormone that your brain makes when you are asleep to help you process that sleep more effectively. So melatonin can be a super important hormone to take if you have like troubles sleeping and stuff. But the trick to using it is to take it at the same time every single day and to go to bed at the same time every single day. That's how you take melatonin. They'll even give melatonin to people when they wake up, when it's actually prescribed by a doctor, sometimes in rare cases, because what that can do is that can help your brain recognize what time of day it is. And then your brain goes, oh, there's a lot of sunlight. I should be awake right now. And it can actually help wake you up. Anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked. So then the other one is a hormone called ghrelin. Robert, I think you've heard me talk about ghrelin before, but Noel, this will be a first for you. So you make two hormones that are related to hunger. One of them is ghrelin and one of them is leptin. Leptin is a hormone that tells your body when you are full after you've been eating. So if you eat some food and you stretch these specific stretch receptors in your stomach, your body will go, oh, I got food, and it will produce leptin, which will make you feel full. But when your stomach is empty, your body will produce ghrelin, and that will tell you that it's time to eat. And they're looking into this really interesting research right now where they are messing with people's ghrelin levels, and they're actually injecting people with ghrelin, which makes you very hungry. But what's weird is they're actually seeing an increase of human growth hormone in response to it. So what happens?
I think they put it in the medications too.
What's that?
I think they put it in the medications too, ghrelin.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but
prescriptions.
But what they're looking into is by injecting someone with ghrelin, they're seeing their human growth hormone levels boost, because what's happening is your body gets this signal that like, hey, I'm really hungry, and then it starts to go into like panic mode in a way, like stress mode, and it's like, I obviously need more muscle mass, bone density. I need to be more athletic because like as an athletic creature, clearly I must be failing in terms of getting myself food. And so like in a weird way, they're seeing like boosts in this, and they might have, you know, that's kind of some interesting research that they're looking into right now. Again, it's totally like, you know, I'm sure it's experimental. I'm sure that like this is not very far along, or and if there probably are massive side effects. Like there's probably results in weight gain because then people are just starving all the time. But anyway, that's kind of a fun thing. So that's how your hormones work, right? They trigger things. So cortisol, getting back to cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, which is a good thing to have in small amounts, right? Without cortisol, we have no reason to, we don't have motivation, right? Like cortisol motivates us to do things when we're like, crap, I'm late, right? That's a good thing. That gets your butt out the door, right? Crap, I need to pay bills. Good, you get to keep your place where you live. Like we like stress is a good thing in a lot of ways. The problem is we live in a world where we create way too much of that stress. And what happens is your body goes, you know, it's like, I mean, if you don't have enough, you know, money to survive, what are you going to do? You're going to make a decision on what you can get rid of in your life. You're like, well, you know, like this was me. Like I was trying to figure out how to like save some money, and I was like, well, yeah, and this is before the pandemic, but I was paying like a lot of money every month to go to the movies, and I was like, all right, because I love going to the movies, and I was like, no more of that. From now on, I am, you know, going to stop going to the movie theater as often. I'm only going to go, you know, I'm going to, you know, go like twice a month at the most, right? And I'm going to try to go as little as possible, and I'm going to wait for things to come out on, you know, on video or whatever, and I'm going to rent them because that's going to save me a lot of money. And then when I go to the movie theater, and this is weird, but this is a hack that I have been applying for over a year now. You know, I always get like a popcorn, and like this is the only time I drink soda. I love soda at the movie theater because that's part of like watching movies. But I was like, from now on, I'm gonna get a kid's meal, which is because they always give you a giant thing of popcorn. I don't need all that crap. I just need like a little. So they give you this little tiny one for children, which is just enough popcorn for me. And they give you a little tiny soda, which I can go get refills on. And that is, you know, like rather than spending $20 on snacks, I'm spending it's $7. And that's way cheaper. So I looked at my budgets, and I looked at what I could get rid of and what I could keep. That's what cortisol does to your body. Your body makes cortisol, and then it goes, all right, well, that muscle over there burns a ton of calories. Let's get rid of it. That fat over there burns very few calories. Let's keep some of that, right? That's what cortisol's job is. Not a bad thing until we start to do it all the time. We see things like decreases in bone density. We see decreases in muscle mass. That's why it's a catabolic hormone. It destroys all of our good stuff catabolically, eats it away. That's why we don't like it, cortisol. Does that make sense, guys? Noel, you with me on that?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. All right, so type 1 osteoporosis, like I said, very prevalent due to a decrease in estrogen levels. Estrogen is anabolic, and so we see a decrease. When those levels decrease, we see things like osteoporosis. Then we've got type 2 osteoporosis, much less common, but this is basically osteoporosis in individuals who are 70 and older. This is where we start to see osteoporosis affecting both men and women. And basically just, it's like, look, your body is old, you know, your body is trying to get rid of as much stuff that it doesn't need as possible so you can burn as few calories as possible. And that's what we see as we tend to get like 70 and older. And these affect the body in slightly different ways. Like if we look at like type 1 osteoporosis, here's what you're typically going to see, right? You're going to see like decreases, particularly in like the spine. And that's why like when they're looking for osteoporosis in women, a lot of times they'll do bone density tests and they'll look a lot at the spine. Whereas if we see type 2 osteoporosis, what we're going to see instead, come on now, show me. Oh, there it is. Actually, it was right here. They're going to look at the femur, the head of the femur. This is for some reason one of the particular places that we find a decrease in bone density. So when they're looking at things, and they're judging your bones, they're actually going to look at like your lumbar vertebrae, and they're going to look at your femur. Those are the two main areas where we really want to have lots of density. And so when we see a decrease in those types of areas, that is like a great place for an early warning sign so that your doctor can catch it really early. Here are some of our considerations when it comes to dealing with clients who have osteoporosis. This first one may sound kind of surprising until you remember our anatomy and physiology class. Your ventilatory threshold may be lower with osteoporosis. And what I mean by that is you may experience with your clients who have osteoporosis a shortness of breath. That seems really weird. You're like, why would our bones have anything to do with our breathing? Well, you got to remember your skeletal system is where you produce red blood cells and white blood cells for that matter. But your skeletal system is where you are producing your blood cells, right? And your blood cells are in charge of carrying oxygen throughout the body. So if you have a decrease in those red blood cell counts, you have a decrease in blood volume, you're going to have a decrease in your ability to carry oxygen. And so you're going to see less of a ventilatory threshold. There's going to be less oxygen uptake. And that's why you'll see like a ventilatory threshold test. You'll see a lot of times they will do these oxygen tests where they'll put like a mask on and they'll have you breathe, and they're looking to test your VO2 max. Or sometimes they'll look at oxygen uptake test. You'll look at versions like this where they'll have people breathe in, and they're looking at like how much oxygen you can extract from the air. And so like that is sort of one of the things they're going to keep an eye on as we tend to get older, right? Also, sometimes they'll do just like that breathing test to see how much like lung volume and lung power you have. That's another version. That one doesn't actually like have you, it doesn't measure like what's going in versus what's going out. That's just you breathing into a tube and this little ball. They're seeing like how high you can raise that ball up off the bottom. You're also going to see your gait and your balance may be negatively affected. So already right there, you're going to see with osteoporosis clients, we are probably going to spend a lot of our time working on balance. We're going to see chronic vertebral fractures, which often result in low back pain. And so again, with decreased bone density in the low back, we do see an increased risk of fractures in the back, right? My mom, for instance, has 4 broken vertebrae in her lower back. Now, that's not 100% because of osteoporosis, by the way. My mom has the same genetic condition that I have because she passed it on to me like a freaking jerk, which is spinal stenosis. And so that's actually where you see overcalcification of the spine. So what you'll get is a lot of bone spurs on your back when you have too much bone density, actually. And so you'll see like over calcification. You'll see these like little knobs and bone spurs start to build up. That's what happens to my mom's spine. And then what ended up happening is she had so much calcium buildup that it all kind of bound together. And then she turned one day and it broke, and it broke all of her discs with it. Kind of like, I don't know, ice building around something, and you broke the ice, but then it broke whatever's underneath it as well. So that's what happened to my mom's spine when I was in high school and stuff. And it'll probably, honestly, it happened to her dad as well. He got it from her. She gave it to me. It'll probably happen to me at some point, which is why I spend so much of my time, keeping my spine healthy. I do a lot of core work. Actually, maybe too much core work, which is why I have a posterior pelvic tilt. So that is definitely something we see in our vertebral fractures. We see a decrease in bone density that can also result in that. We also see an increased risk of falls, which really just kind of comes back to a decrease in your gait and a decrease in your balance. And so one of the things we want to keep in mind is that as our clients are getting older, we definitely want to avoid foam rolling, because that foam rolling can put way too much pressure on that undense bone, right? The bone's not dense enough to handle all that pressure. It could result in some type of fracture. You might be able to do foam rolling but you want to be very cautious with your clients who have osteoporosis. What are our risk factors? Who's going to have osteoporosis? Older clients. Females are generally at a higher risk. We do see if you have a family history, that's going to show that, we still don't know 100% why genetically some people are just kind of predisposed to this. But we do know that it is like sometimes like you just have a greater risk factor. I'm sure all of us in here in this call right now, we all know somebody who's like way older and they're just super fit and have been, like just that older person who's like, I'm gonna keep working in my yard till the day I die. They're 90s and they're just working in their yard, It's like, man, that person's like not old, We don't 100% know the stats behind that. Ethnicity tends to play a little bit of a role in bone density. Like I'm from like the whitest part of the Northwest, which is already just like a very cloud covered area. And so due to like cloud coverage and just a bunch of white people, there's a lot of bone density issues where I come from. We do tend to see a lot less of that in like other ethnicities. Like for instance, you guys never got a chance to meet her because she's not at Sochi right now, but Debbie, who is one of our PFT instructors, is paler than I am, which I know is shocking. And she's like a blonde, like, very clearly like from some Scandinavian, like Swedish heritage, right? And so she has to get vitamin D injections pretty regularly ordered by her doctor. And Debbie is a super active, she's the pound for pound strongest person who's ever worked at Sochi. I may be able to lift more than her, but I also weigh more than her. She's like an ex-gymnast, ex-bodybuilder, like super great shape, but her bone density struggles constantly. She has struggled with it her whole life. And it's just because like she just does not absorb vitamin D very effectively. So she has to take vitamin D supplements and she has to get vitamin D injections because vitamin D is what triggers the calcification of things in your body. And so that's another thing we see. We see, we want to make sure our clients with osteoporosis are getting plenty of calcium in their diet, but they're not going to be able to use it unless they also get plenty of vitamin D in their diet. So they need to get out in the sunlight because that's where we absorb vitamin D. So we do know that sometimes ethnicity plays a role in that. We will see greater bone density and less bone density depending on what population we're in. And low BMI, we actually see a BMI underweight is a warning factor for bone density issues. And this comes from two places. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the call, when we see like low body weight, that can be a warning sign of osteoporosis because your bone is not as dense. So you clearly don't weigh as much because you don't have as much bone. That can be an early warning sign. But it can also be when you are underweight, we do know that that results in low sex hormones, right? We see less testosterone, we see less estrogen, and both of those are bad, right? Both of those are going to be warning signs. So if you have a client who maybe has struggled with like an eating disorder, they can get early onset osteoporosis. This is why anorexia and bulimia are both so dangerous when it comes to bone density issues. Smoking has been shown to lower bone density. A sedentary lifestyle, obviously, we've been talking plenty about that. Sitting around, you don't use your bones, you lose them, right? Low calcium in your diet, right? Obviously, that makes sense. But here's an interesting one. Excessive sodium, protein, and caffeine and vitamin A have been shown to reduce bone density. Not that we don't like vitamin A, not that we don't like protein, not that we don't like sodium. Sodium is great for you in the right amounts. But those things actually interact with how your body is able to absorb calcium. So like we do see like diets that are excessive in those areas can actually result in, it basically just interrupts calcium's ability to interact with vitamin D. And then loss of height. If we notice that you are getting shorter, that's a sign that your bone density is decreasing. So we're going to go with low intensity exercise is recommended just to make sure that we don't end up with any fractures. But we do know that exercise has been shown to reduce the reduction in bone density. That's a double negative, but it is true. By exercising, you will slow down the loss of bone tissue. You will increase your bone density, ideally. So we want to exercise, right? You will notice the mode here they are focusing on in particular is the treadmill. And the reason we're doing that is because the treadmill has the most vibrations. It's the most weight bearing. And so because of that, those vibrations are more likely to increase your bone density. But you will notice it does say with handrail support. Again, as we get older and we lose our bone density, it affects how we're able to walk. So if you have a client who has like a really awkward gait, they have reduced balance, you want to make sure they have that handrail support there so they can get the impact of the treadmill without the risk of falling, right? 2 to 5 days per week in terms of your frequency. You'll know sometimes it'll be really low just because if you do have a client who's new to this, it's going to take them a little bit longer to repair. So you may need to be a little bit short on the days. 40 to 85% of your VO2 max. That's a really large range. That's going to be below, that's going to be sub zone 1 up to zone 2 in terms of your cardio. So that's going to be anywhere from 50 to 85% of your heart rate max. And what the reason for that is, if they can handle a high heart rate max, go for it. But if they can't, then you got to make sure you're being gentle. And so we just see a really wide range there. Wide ranges, I think, are the least helpful in terms of instructing us on how to write a program. But it does kind of show you a little bit about like what's going on, right? You're going to have some people with osteoporosis who are in pretty good cardiovascular shape, and we're just trying to prevent them from getting a more severe version of it. And you're going to see some people with osteoporosis where it has completely sapped their ability to like extract oxygen. It just depends on who your client is. And that's why we also see 8 to 10 minute bouts of exercise up to a full 60 minutes. Again, super wide range here. You're going to run into different types of osteoporosis. It's almost important, and you should do this kind of thing anyways, but to ask your clients, like if they say they are suffering from osteoporosis, you got to ask your client, how long? When did you discover this, right? And that way, like if they're like, oh, I just found out I'm struggling with it, that's why I'm here at the gym. Great. That means that they're still in a place where it's like, let's reverse that. And so it's like, we're going hard, you know? Whereas if they're like, I've been dealing with this for several years, you're going to go, all right, let's ease you in and see if we can build up your tolerance. Yeah, what's up?
When you dealing with the bone issues, do that means you got to tighten up the core in order for the bones to heal? So these diseases, bone densities means tighten core, right? Means you need to tighten core, right?
You definitely do. There's not a direct correlation between like core training and increased bone density, but remember your spine is one of the first places that gets compromised.
Exactly.
Your core is what keeps your spine stacked the way it's supposed to be stacked. So yes, not that core training is going to increase bone density as effectively. Like core training tends to be a lot of isometrics, which actually don't have a super positive effect on bone density. Typically weight-bearing like impact exercises are what have the greatest bone density increases. But that's not the reason why they're so important. It may not be a density importance. What's important is keeping the spine held in place. So Noel, my answer is definitely yes, but not because it increases density. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you will want to work on the core. So you will want to work on the core and work its way out in order for the whole body to be complete, right?
Yeah, I would definitely do a lot of core training, but I would also do a lot of like walking and a lot of weightlifting.
But the core is more important though to start as a basic, and then work its way out as far as strength.
Yes. Yeah, I can't say that that's untrue. But it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, but I want to have my cake and I want to eat it too. So I would never, if I only got to do one thing, I would probably pick, you're right, I'd probably pick core training. But I never want to do just one thing. I would want to do a full body program. I will say this, one thing that we haven't addressed yet, remember the impact is what results in high bone density. So you guys know how much I love to use, just because I think they're just so cool biologically. They're just one of the coolest animals out there. We're going to do another cat analogy here. Cats have some of the fastest repairing bones in the animal kingdom. Cats, bone density, purring. So this is what's kind of weird. And they have looked into this research here, but cats purring, like, it's at a frequency somewhere between 25 and 150 hertz. And here's what's really cool. Frequencies within this range have been shown to improve bone density and promote healing. So you'll see this weird thing. A lot of times we think of like when cats are purring, we think that it's like, oh, they're happy. But what's weird is like a cat will fall off a ledge and break its ribs and it will purr. And you're like, why is the cat purring when they're hurt? And what they have found is that cats will heal faster from bone fractures than any other animal on the planet. How freaking weird is that? And the theory here is that that frequency creates little vibrations, and those little vibrations result in increased bone density. And so we have looked at this in terms of like healing human beings, where they have looked at like, well, does it make sense to maybe strap like a vibrating thing on like a person who has a broken bone and see if it heals their bones faster? They've looked at it. So far, the results are inconclusive. We haven't figured out how to like translate that to human healing yet. But that is what's kind of interesting about like cats purring. But one thing we have looked at, and this has been proven, is if we looked at the power plate. The power plate is this really expensive piece of gym equipment. You can see here, this is like a $13,000 one. Here's like a rip-off version, which is $26,000. And by 26,000, I mean 2,600. That's not a bad deal. But this is like a product that you can buy, and you will see power plate group exercise classes. And what it is it's this little machine that as you're standing on it, it just goes, and it's vibrating like crazy. And you can do, squats, you can do lunges, you can do all these like interesting stretches. You can see the real version, they have like resistance bands attached to it. So Noel, look at this. This is all core, like this is a squat, but this is core, right? That's called a V-sit. That's great for your core. This is a bird dog. This is absolutely one of the best exercises for your core that exists. I love this exercise. Everyone should incorporate bird dogs into their program. Side planks, you can put your feet here, you can put your arm here. Regular planks. So the power plate is this really great piece of equipment, and this piece of equipment in particular has been shown to be phenomenal for bone density. And it's because it vibrates at a super fast frequency and it creates more bone density than any other type of program. There's a Bulgarian split squat on top. Love that. Actually, she's got her knee up there. I guess that's just a kneeling squat. But anyway, there is some really interesting research on like the power plate and how it increases bone density. So if you really do have somebody with bone density issues, and you work at a gym that has a power plate, get on there. A lot of times you'll find power plates in places like Equinoxes have a lot of them. You'll even see, man, this is like, in terms of overhead, this has got to be super expensive. But power plate group exercise classes. Let's see if I can find a picture of a whole class. Yeah, look at that. There's like 4. I mean, this would be expensive to get your gym open, but like once your gym is open, you could be like the name in bone density group exercise classes. Like you open up like get in a strip mall, get yourself a little place, and then just like, there you go. Just open up a little studio that has like a bunch of these and teach group exercise classes. You're going to definitely have like the 65 and older crowd, but boy, can you market the crap out of that. Your overhead cost is expensive in the beginning, but like you have a guaranteed audience, so all you got to do is like, when someone looks up, in Google's like their doctor tells them, hey, you have osteoporosis, you need to increase your activity level. And then they get online to figure out how to do that. They start Googling like bone density and exercise. All of a sudden an ad from your gym shows up, like built-in business. Sorry, I'm switching to marketing mode, but that is something that you guys should consider if this is the type of thing you want to work on. 20 to 60 minutes per day is where we were. Your assessments: push, pull, overhead squat, sit and stand into a chair. A lot of times, if you have really severe bone density issues, they may not have the balance or the confidence to do squats. So instead, we'll have a chair there for support. Flexibility wise, you can do static and active stretches. Just make sure you lose the foam rolling because they have density issues. You don't want to put too much pressure on the bones. 1 to 3 sets, 8 to 20 repetitions. We see a pretty large range there. That's relatively low intensity, but you can go all the way up to 85% of your 1 rep max. If you want to go like higher on the intensity, you totally can. Just make sure your client is ready for it. You should definitely never start a new client there, right? New clients start in the low intensity, high repetition range. As they get more used to exercise, then we can start really working. We do know that heavy exercise has really positive effects on bone density. You know, you got to think of the fact that like if I had a heavy weight in my arm, right, that weight's pulling down on my arm. This lever, this bone here is, you know, bending under the weight, and that's creating small microscopic fractures. So we like heavy weights with our bone density clients if they can handle it. Obviously too much too fast and they're going to be in a lot of pain. So slow progression, well monitored based on postural control. Exercises should be progressed from free sitting up to standing. So again, you're going to try to build up your confidence, your client's balance, then get them up onto standing. And then I love this bit down here. Focus on the hips, the thighs, the back, and the arms. These are the #1 places because these are all long bones. Long bones tend to be more at risk for bone density issues. So you're gonna do a lot of stuff for the lumbopelvic hip complex, a lot of stuff for the upper back, keeping them nice and upright and their lumbar spine. And you actually do wanna do a lot of arm work here as well. We lose a lot of bone density in the arms, and that's why you see a lot of elder folks with like broken bones in their arms and wrists and things like that. So we actually really like biceps and triceps for our bone density clients. Do you guys have any questions on osteoporosis? It's good. We've had a lot of questions today, which is helpful.
Nope.
Robert, you feeling good?
I like the power plate idea though.
Dude, yeah. That's the thing. Like,
cool. But
I'm
it's
all about
though.
When it comes to like business ideas, I'm all about marketing towards like a niche. Become the, you know, like the name.
The guru.
Like, yeah, like 24-hour fitness, for instance. Like when you hear that name, what are they? Obviously they're a gym, but there's lots of gyms. The 24-hour, and there's a lot of gyms that are open 24 hours a day, but 24-hour fitness has it in the name. 24 hours, you know? And so people are like, oh, when they think of 24-hour fitness, they think of convenience. So they have a niche already, and that draws customers toward them. You know, they're like, I'm busy. I never have enough time in the day. There's a 20, you know, and then that's what makes them go to that gym. Equinox, you know, what they're selling is like an image. They're a big bougie fancy gym. That's what they're marketing. They're not marketing the fact that they're a gym. They're marketing the fact that they are expensive. But that makes some people go, well, that's where I want to go to the expensive place, you know? So you gotta think about like what you're marketing, you know, where is there, anyway, we'll get into it. We are going to have a marketing class. I should get out of this. All right, let's look at arthritis. Arthritis is a condition characterized by dysfunction of the joints. So this is all over the place. So when I say like a condition of the joints, it's either through decreased cartilage, sometimes you'll see increased bone spurs, or you'll see lack of space in the joint. So there's actually 2 types of arthritis we got to look at. We do know that like your exercise tolerance will be, this is weird. I think this slide is out of order. Hold on just a second. I got to fix this because I know that's not right. I think I might have just like messed it up. There we go. Oh, nope. Okay. So arthritis, there's 2 different types here. There is what is called osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis is what we're all thinking of when we think of arthritis. It is also known as degenerative joint disease, right? And basically what it is like, hey man, you've lived a hard life. you've been working your butt off your whole life. And so you have decreased the cartilage in your joints. You know, they've gotten frayed, they've gotten thinned out from like, you know, trauma. So we see like degenerative joint disease, it's gonna look like this, right? The cartilage, the materials between your bones, you beat them up, you know, you've had a life hard lived, you know, and so everything's kind of worn down. What happens is then the bones start to impact on each other, and that can create imperfections in a very negative way. That can create like too much damage to the bone that your body really can't keep up. So what it does is it actually creates bone spurs. You get too much buildup of too much bone tissue, and then that starts making it even harder for all that cartilage. So the cartilage gets thinned. That's what degenerative joint disease is. You can usually spot it when they do x-rays. They'll look for imperfections in the bones, and they'll look for a lack of space. So you can see there's definitely arthritis in both of these, but you will notice there is much more on this side. And so this person's like, yeah, I get a lot of left knee pain. My knee hurts whenever I do this exercise, right? And it's like, that makes sense. You got older, right? As you got older, you know, your joints, they've just been worn down slowly throughout the years. You've been using your joints for 60, 70 years, you know? It makes sense that those tissues would eventually get worn down. Because remember, the other thing is like, this is soft tissue that does not get as much blood flow as your muscles. So it repairs much, much more slowly compared with other types of tissues. So that's osteoarthritis, more commonly referred to as degenerative joint disease, right? But then there is another version, which is called rheumatoid arthritis. This is one that is typically going to be present if you have a family history of it. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to this as rheumatism, but rheumatoid arthritis is actually an autoimmune disorder. So when I say autoimmune disorder, what I mean is I'm actually talking about your own immune system is attacking your body, which is a bummer. You'll see like sometimes like some of the odd symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, you'll see like flushed cheeks is actually a warning sign because it also affects like their skin in other ways. But when we're talking about the joints, it's an autoimmune disease in which the body experiences a thickening of articular tissue. So the tissues between your joints, your body will actually make more and more and more of it. So here's kind of the difference, right? Here's a healthy joint. And then we see like this soft tissue here actually gets eroded over time. That's osteoarthritis, right? Rheumatoid arthritis, you will notice there is extra tissue. For some reason, your body is like, wow, we need to have more tissue between the joints. And so your body makes too much tissue, and then that crowds the bones together, and the bones will start to, you know, bulge and deform. And so when you see rheumatoid arthritis, you'll see like, obviously these bones are not sitting at the angle. So you start to see like knobs around the joints. That's a sign of rheumatoid arthritis. Whenever you've heard somebody, have you guys ever heard like an older person go, it's gonna rain, I can feel it in my bones, you know? That is somebody with rheumatism. That's like rheumatoid arthritis, and they literally can feel. This is why so many older folks move to places like Florida and Arizona and Palm Springs. They move there because there is less pressure in the air, and they can feel it in their joints. They actually feel healthier. There isn't as much like pressure pushing on their joints, and so it's much more comfortable and less painful to live in places like that. That's why we see so many retirement villages in super sunny, super dry, low pressure areas, low barometric pressure areas. So there's different joints that are commonly affected here, by the way. With osteoarthritis, it's typically the joints of like the spine, hips, and knees, you know, those areas that get worn down through too much usage over the years. But with rheumatoid arthritis, we typically see it very commonly in the hands, the wrists, the feet, and then we see it in the knees as well. And so those little tiny joints, we start to see like bulging, right? And so, you know, you'll see like a bulge, and then that'll cause, you know, that joint has to, ouch, that joint has to send, this is not a, this is a hinge joint. Do not try to move it this way. So that actually will cause like a little bulging, and so it'll move in an angle it's not supposed to move, and it's painful. So our considerations for arthritis clients, we'll typically see a maximum oxygen uptake is decreased here. So this is really similar to what we saw in osteoporosis, but the reasons are different. Both of them will struggle with breathing. A lot of times people get confused between arthritis and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis, bone density. Arthritis, bone space, right? The space is worn down, and so the bones are hitting each other. One is a bone issue, one is a joint issue. They're both skeletal issues, skeletal system issues, but one's the bones, one's the joints, right? Arthritis is the joints, porosis is the bones. Get them straight, right? But what's weird is they both result in cardio problems for two totally different reasons. In osteoporosis, there's less bone density. Less bone density means less red blood cells. In arthritis, lack of space results in poor posture because they're trying to find a comfortable position. Poor posture results in decreased oxygen uptake. They cannot expand their diaphragm as much as they're supposed to because they cannot sit upright because that hurts their joints. So their tolerance for exercise may be limited due to arthritis pain. Every now and then you're going to have a client who has arthritis. They're going to be super motivated. They're an awesome client. They never cancel. But then every now and then they're going to call you and be like, look, I'm not running late. I'm up, but I'm in a lot of pain today, and I feel like I can't come to the gym. And they'll literally experience flare-ups sometimes, and that is just going to happen. Now, it's up to you as to what you want to do about that. But that is something that is fairly common in your arthritic clients. They'll wake up and they're like, my knees feel like they're on fire. I can barely walk. You know, it depends on rheumatoid arthritis clients are the ones who are typically going to struggle, especially in the early morning. So you're going to have to be really careful. If you're an early morning trainer, which let me tell you, you should be, that's where all the money is. But if you're an early morning trainer, and you have a client with rheumatoid arthritis, you're probably not going to want to schedule your sessions for early in the morning because it usually takes them a couple hours to kind of ease in and get that arthritic pain under control. Whether it's through like a medication that takes the inflammation away, or whether it's just like by kind of getting up and getting everything kind of lubricated. That's something to be aware of. So typically you want to encourage your clients who have arthritis to say like, all right, I want you to get up a couple hours before our session. And so like, make sure that like you're up and you've started your day. Don't roll out of bed and come straight to the gym. Because if they do that, they're probably just going to have to cancel because they're going to be in too much pain. So be aware of that. Look for comorbidities, particularly osteoporosis. A lot of times these two are commonly linked together. You start to see somebody deal with arthritis, so then they have like stiffness and pain. They stop moving as much. Guess what? When you stop moving as much, you end up reducing your bone density. So make sure you're screening. If they say they have arthritis, make sure that they, say like, hey, have you talked to your doctor about osteoporosis as well? Yeah, be careful with that morning stiffness, especially in rheumatoid arthritis. Here's the thing though, here's what we know about exercise, right? It has really positive effects. By improving your flexibility, that's going to improve your mobility. That's going to increase the space between your joints. They're less likely to grind. Therefore, they're less likely to experience pain. We also see a lot of times because people are avoiding painful positions and painful postures, they'll move the way they're not designed to move. When you move the way you're not designed to move, you're going to decrease your balance, right? It's like when you have, if you're in a weird posture, your body's not going to know how to balance properly because it's not designed to move that way. So you avoid it because you're in pain, right? But then you decrease your balance. Like when my spine was all messed up in the last couple of weeks, like I was like leaning slightly to the side, like my balance was messed up. I'd wake up in the morning and be like, ugh, and that was just me like trying to avoid like a painful position, but it screwed up my balance, right? It alters your proprioception. So exercising improves that, right? That gives them their balance back. And obviously it improves their cardiovascular status, because we start to evaluate, it fixes that awkward posture. Also, this is an interesting one, but
and it's called equilibrium.
Yep, equilibrium. Yep, that's how far. Equilibrium is how far outside of your center you can balance. So I have a lot of equilibrium right now, right? I'm away from my center because my arms are outside. So yeah, absolutely. And we see an elevated pain threshold. This is a fun one, right? Exercising, you know, increase, you know, no pain, no gain. You know, I actually desperately hate that phrase. But in this case, it actually applies really well. Your clients actually develop an increased tolerance. And it improves your endurance, which is great, right? A lot of times people will lose their endurance because, you know, those general small aches and pains. So arthritis, what do we do? Stationary cycling is nice because that can keep them in an upright posture. Treadmill, we love it. Low impact step aerobics are great. And then rowing machine is also really good here. 3 to 5 days per week, so nothing fancy here. This is, you know, classic for everybody. 60 to 80% of max heart rate, totally normal there. The only reason we're not seeing even higher, because their heart could probably handle it, but just because, like, if you get above their max heart rate, chances are they're traveling really fast, which means there's gonna be a lot of impact. A lot of impact, not so great for the joints, and so it kind of hurts. So we're focusing on stages 1 and stage 2 of cardio here. Duration is 30 minutes. You're gonna notice our duration is gonna be relatively short here, just because long duration means more inflammation. More inflammation means more aching joints, right? So we're definitely, you know, they just showed that, what was it? Who was it? God dang it, they released that video. Oh God. He's on the Heat, but he got done doing like a press conference. You saw him get up from the press conference. He was like, ugh. He's like he's in his 20s, but that's what it's like playing in the NBA. You know, he played a lot of basketball. So duration, we're going to keep that duration relatively short so that we can keep the inflammation low. Assessments, totally normal assessments. Push, pull, overhead squat, they're all good. Foam rolling, if it's tolerable, go for it. But then like static and active stretches here, I will say be cautious with your static stretches if your client has arthritis. You don't want to take them into these super exaggerated ranges of motion. If you get into like really wide ranges of motion, that can cause the joints to start grinding. So you got to be a little cautious with that. And then definitely like a kneeling hip flexor stretch. Totally got to avoid stuff like that with arthritis clients. They shouldn't ever be placing their joints into like a grinding position with the floor. So if they are going to do a kneeling hip flexor stretch, you better do it with like 3 pillows under their knee. 1 to 3 sets. And then you'll notice 10 to 12 repetitions. We're kind of low. We're right in the middle, right? We're not low. We're not high in terms of repetitions. We're not low because we don't want to lift super heavy and put too much pressure on their joints, but we're also not high on the repetitions because we don't want to put too much time on the joints. So we're relatively right in the middle there. And there's where your head, yep, there we go. So special considerations, avoid heavy lifting and avoid high repetitions, AKA, you know what the best type of lifting is for clients with arthritis? Hypertrophy. That is our best phase of training. Not because we're trying to make bodybuilders with arthritis. It just happens to be that that is almost the perfect rep range. So hypertrophy and the lower ranges of strength endurance are the best for clients with arthritis. And then stay in that pain-free range of motion. You shouldn't be doing, you want them to get to like straight joints, but you don't want them to lock their joints out, right? That's a big deal. And that is osteoporosis and arthritis. We had a good bit of discussion today. Do you guys have any questions? No? All right, I do want to show you a quick soap note. So here's our client, Jude. They have osteoporosis and arthritis. They're retired, which is nice. They're like chess, fishing, and going for walks. And they are on anti-inflammatory medication. So they're on painkillers. Commonly deal with a lot of knee pain. They also get a lot of upper back pain when they're sitting. So we definitely see like a lot of like kyphosis here, right? That upper back rounding. They're 72 years old. He was 5'11", but now he's 5'9", so clearly losing height. That's a sign for osteoporosis. No surprise here. we see upper cross syndrome, we see a forward hip, we see elevated shoulders, we see rounded shoulders, right? We see all those things, which make a lot of sense. We know this person's, if they've lost height, they're definitely in this type of posture here, right? And we are seeing an excessive forward lean and knees cave in. This person, posture-wise, is a mess, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time working on that posture. We modified it to a sit-stand in the chair assessment. That way there's not too much pressure on their knees. We do the push-pull assessment. And then because this person is in their 70s, we really like that tug test that I talked about. So we are going to alternate exercise between days of strength training and days of walking, but we are going to give them a day in the middle with rest. So we're probably going to do strength training on Monday. We're going to have them go for a walk on Tuesday. Then we're going to have them rest on Wednesday so that their joints have a little bit of time off. Then we're going to be on Thursday, we're going to have them strength train again. Friday, they're going to do a little bit of cardio. And then on Saturday, they're going to have another strength training workout. And then on Sunday, they're going to rest. So we got 3 days of strength training and 2 days of cardio, right? Cardio plan is to walk 2 days per week, 30 minutes at a pace that you can feel your breath, but you still should be able to hold a conversation, right? So slightly elevated, but relatively low intensity. Our resistance training, we're doing 3 sets of 10 at a medium tempo. So that's going to be kind of like a 1-1-1 tempo. They're not doing super slow tempo. They're not doing super fast tempo. We want to be gentle on the joints. They also don't have to do these big, long static holds. Gentle on the joints, right? And then we're going to alternate. We're going to have an upper body workout on workout A, a lower body workout on workout B. So what that does is like they're going to have upper cardio rest, lower cardio, and then they're not going to get a rest day. Instead, they're going to go into a total body workout on that last day. This is meant to be sort of a gentle day. That way we can get plenty of training volume, but we're giving the body plenty of time to rest in between, right? And we're going to have core mixed in there. Make no mistake about it. There's definitely going to be some core in there. Flexibility wise, we want to focus on the pecs, lats, rotators, biceps, femoris, TFL, and calves. Pretty standard list for knees cave in, pretty standard list for upper cross syndrome. But on all of these, we do want to avoid those excessive ranges of motion so that we don't create too much inflammation in the joints and we don't get any joint pain. You guys have any questions about why we did what we did? Does that plan make sense to you guys? I know this is kind of an interesting workout schedule here. This is more for the sake of variety than anything. Just goes to show you, you don't always have to have just a 2-day split upper or lower. You can do you can go upper, lower, total body. That is still a really effective split. Questions there, guys?
Yeah, can I get that email of that workout regimen thing?
Which one?
What you just showed.
Yeah, it always goes out. Yeah,
okay.
I always put the soap notes in the emails.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need that.
Totally. By the way, that's a good workout schedule for anybody. Like, I
need me a workout schedule.
That's what I mean. Yeah, like if you want some, if you actually, let's see here, NASM upper body, lower body training split. Noel, you haven't really been through one of our. You haven't really been through our program design class yet, so you don't really know how to write workouts yet. But if you go to NASM's blog, go to their website, they have a ton of preset workouts. Let's see if I can just find one for you. And you could totally just pick an upper body day, pick a lower body day, and then pick a workout plans.
My thing is, I just bought a set of resistant bands from Amazon, and they real sturdy. You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
I like resistant bands, man. They work. They real good. You know what I'm saying? Especially for definition and strength and core. You know.
Well, take a look right here. They got a whole lower body day that is all. A lot of these are like little dumbbells and stuff, but they're using resistance bands. Yeah, this is basically a big glute workout. But check out their blog. They have a ton of, they have a lot of really, really good, workout plans out there. And they're all just like on blog posts. So you kind of got to flip through them. I'm going dad bod to dad bod. And they're just little articles that have, how to incorporate play, into kettlebells, incorporate preparing for golf, just little things that are fun. Oh, there we go. Obstacle course workout. These are brutal, which is a fun one. Kettlebells, yeah. Push-ups. That's a lot of bodyweight stuff. Boot camping. So yeah, check out their blog. And then we'll teach you how to build some workouts starting next week, actually. We'll get into writing workouts next week. All right. Robert, do you have any questions?
No, I'm pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
Awesome. Well, all right, gents. I will see you guys tomorrow morning.
Peace out.
All right. You guys all have a good one.